Most people think therapy is about having a breakthrough. It's not. Breakthroughs feel powerful, but change comes from repetition, regulation, and practicing something different when it matters. This is metatherapy, where we don't just talk about mental health, we build the skills that make it work. Before we go further, a quick note. While I am a licensed therapist, this is educational content. It is not therapy. It's not personalized mental health treatment, and it's not a substitute for working with your own licensed professional. If you're looking for individualized support, metatherapy can actually help you with that too. We offer customized therapist matching at metatherapy.guide, designed to connect you with a clinician who actually fits your needs, goals, and personality. Here, what we're doing is strengthening your psychological capacity. So whether you're in therapy or not, you're building skill, clarity, and emotional maturity. Every week, metatherapy has a rhythm. Meditation Mondays is structured psychological meditations to prepare for therapy, process after sessions, or stabilize when you can't be in one. Therapy Tech Tuesdays is when we have practical guidance on using technology intentionally to support mental wellness. And then Thursday Thinkers is conversations with therapists and experts about what actually creates sustainable change. This isn't inspiration, it's implementation. Let's get to work. Imagine remembering every single day of your life since you were 6 years old. The weather, the news, the arguments, the pain, all of it. Now imagine learning how not to be controlled by it. Today, we're talking about memory, trauma, neurodivergence, and how to release emotional weight from the past. Welcome to Thursday Thinkers on Metatherapy, where we explore the deeper layers of mental health with the people who live and breathe it. Today, I'm joined by Frank Healy, licensed professional counselor and author of over 20 books, including Heal Your Memories, Who Could Forget, Somatic Therapy for Beginners, and his newest release, Happy Every Day. Gosh, we're all after that, aren't we? Frank has something rare. He remembers every day of his life since age 6. Frank, welcome.
Yes, it's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you. And what an incredible experience. So let's start with that. If you would, when you say you remember every day, can you say what that actually means?
What it means is I remember the day of the week every day falls on, and I remember the weather from each day and the area that I was in, and I remember personal events, the good and the bad, as well as if there were any big significant news events that day. And it started about almost 60 years ago, well, the week of February 28th to March 4th, 1960. So I was sick at home and too sick to even be up playing with toys. And it happened that my uncle Billy down the street had just given me a calendar for that year. So, well, it's probably nothing remarkable that a 6-year-old would know the primetime TV lineup for every night. I applied that. I'd look at the calendar on each block and I'd picture and play the tune coming on tune in my head of what would be on TV. Like Sundays were Wonderful World, Disney's Wonderful World of Color, and Saturdays were Flipper. And well, for Wednesdays and Thursdays, I had to make a distinction with Batman because so I pictured Batman on the Wednesdays and Robin on the Thursdays. And by the end of that week, I realized like I knew the calendar for that whole year. I knew that my birthday that year, May 21st, would be a Saturday, and the Thanksgiving would be the 24th of November, and Christmas would be a Sunday. And from that week on, every day, as I live my life, I make mental notes each day about what's happening and what date it is.
Incredible. And you've described some of what I imagine are some of the more positive aspects of your childhood and some of the enjoyable modes of entertainment and shows and things like that. I have to imagine you had some bad days. And I'm wondering, what was it like to retain the bad days as well?
What it was like was, in addition to all the things I just told you about, retaining memories, I also retain the emotions from the memories. So I can relive the joy of vacations, good times with friends, and accomplishments growing up in school and when I was and in the working world, and but also retain social slights, romantic breakups before I met my wife, and a lot of the negative stuff. And so I became interested in psychology to study says because I wondered if there's a way that I could, since I'm not going to let go of any of these memories, at least maybe I could let go of the feelings and emotions from the bad memories so that
Mhm.
if that memory popped up, I'd just be like, okay, so what? It happened without any emotion behind it. And so I've learned over the years letting go with letting go of memories from of the feelings through changing my thoughts about them, cognitive behavioral, which is kind of therapy I perform now as a therapist, as well as I use some tenets of emotional freedom technique or tapping, as well as, neurolinguistic programming was big in the 80s and 90s, where you do a couple memories, like you pick a good and a bad memory and flood the good emotions to outdo the bad ones in a meditative state. So, and there's, lots of other tricks, or I connect like a bad memory from a particular day, and I connect it to a good memory from that date in another year.
Oh, interesting. So kind of reframing it based on using the more positive aspects and then being able to more lean into that, I suppose.
Yes, that's it, to be able to lean into it and overpower the bad with good. It is a kind of a neurological fact that strong the good feelings are stronger than bad feelings. Now, somebody who just maybe had a death in the family might really question that, but it does. I'm kind of feeling for some of our Olympic athletes right now that's going on who maybe didn't do as well as they'd hoped.
Hmm.
But but you can flood out the bad with good memories from the past.
Yeah, I think that's a great lesson for all of us to understand how the brain works and how we can leverage it more effectively and bring, as your latest book I sort of hints to, like bring more happiness into our lives. Going back to when you were younger, when did you realize that, oh wait, not everybody remembers everything the way I do? And then who did you talk to, confide in? How did you come to understand it and make sense of it?
Well, a few months after I started remembering everything, I told a man who was a friend of the family, yeah, on August 4th, we were down at the shore in Sea Isle. My dad took my brother and I out on a rowboat in the bay, and at one point we dropped an oar. Then the man said, do you know that's unusual? I don't know what I did on August 4th. And I thought, well, I guess not everybody can do this. And over the years, only my family knew about it. But when I was 14 years old, at the end of eighth grade, they decided to have a talent show on the last day of school. And I tried out. Displaying my memory. And the next thing you know, after that tryout, it was all over the school. But
Wow.
so that was kind of fun. But the day before the show, the vice principal told me, it's probably, some of the more rowdy and obnoxious kids might not appreciate this. So
Mhm.
maybe it's better to not be in the show. But I'd already gotten well known at that point, and they stuck to singing and magic for the shows. But it still made people know about me and my memory. And then over the years, people have said, I mean, I hear a lot of comments which I've learned to be politely indifferent towards, like, oh, you're good with numbers. You should have been an accountant or an economist or something. But it's more about autobiographical memory than it is about math and being good with numbers.
Right.
So, didn't
Wow.
realize that until they studied me at the University of California in Irvine, where I was number 12, and they studied about 100 people since then.
And so with that, can you tell us a little bit about for those who don't know how memory works and the brain and the function, at a kind of high level, how would you describe the mechanism that gives you the ability that you have?
Well, one of the things they did when they studied, I mean, I always thought that up until that time in 2011, February 9th, when they studied me, I always thought that it was something I had worked on. But
Mm,
one of the things they did was give us a CAT scan or MRI and they discovered that both myself and some of the other candidates that they did that with, parts of our frontal lobes, which are the thinking centers of the brain, are almost twice the size of the average person. So
uh,
yeah, so that's so I thought, oh, so this is a talent. It's not just something I worked on.
right, right. That you were born with extra brain, really, right? To a certain extent, or at
Yeah.
least extra brain in terms of that part and function. So we can understand the positive aspects of that. What would you say are some of the downsides? What are some of the things that I have to imagine? I'm just guessing here, but there's 6-year-old kids out there who have similar experiences that maybe seek out help. What are the kinds of things they're seeking help for in this day and age?
In this day and age, 'cause a lot of people are seeking help because of their anxiety about the world situation, and and they're looking to seek help with. No, I do help a lot of people with anxiety and depression, as well as a little bit of addictions and family issues. But quite a lot of the people are seeking help with post traumatic stress. So maybe they were in a car accident and don't want to drive or even get in a car anymore.
Hmm.
So that's a part of it is yeah, so that's a big part. And then for trauma abuse as a kid, which can help. And that's even some my Heal Your Memory series of books are about. I wrote 3 books where it's a self-help trilogy where I interviewed 12 to 15 people for each book and asked them like, are who'd overcome some big trauma but are now happy and thriving in their lives, like school bullying, workplace bullying, rape on the street, or a career sidelining injury, and how
Hmm.
they overcame a lot of that.
Yeah, and where my understanding is that the latest research is suggesting that people, not that we want people to go through trauma, but that people who are able to survive through that and adapt as a result of that actually end up with some maybe superhero strengths, psychologically speaking.
Yeah, so it's like the books are a combination of memory of the stories to inspire people, along with what, some exercises that the reader can do themselves to help heal themselves and then be happy and thriving in their own lives.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you talk a little bit when I'm working with clients? And I know I mean, there's a lot of material out there that is thankfully finally informing the public about the fact that memory is both emotional and physiological. And the emotional part gets stored in the body. And sometimes, well, oftentimes, thinking your way through it is not going to solve it. It's really more of a body sensation thing and being aware and releasing the storage in the body of whether it be trauma or other emotional components. Can you talk a little bit about your perspective on that? What your experience has been in that realm?
Well, yes, it's probably, like thinking doesn't help always with emotions because you have to feel, and people move around and like moving around sometimes releasing the feeling. I'll give a basic example of that. If someone was a victim of rape or incest as a child, during that moment, they were helpless to even move their body. Someone was controlling them and moving around, thinking about the incident, but then moving around now and recognizing, hey, I can release this. I have control now. I have power. And that can affect such things as they can generalize that sometimes and think they can't control anything in their lives, any
Mhm.
aspect. So even moving around and moving their body can help them realize the other things that they now can do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
We
so
often hear about and talk about a shift. Can you talk a little bit about what that shift might look like or feel like for someone who is doing exactly what you said? They're moving around, they're getting it out of their body, they're shifting but there's a shift, right? What has
Yeah.
been your kind of experience with what that shift feels like or looks like for people?
Well, some people really, I mean, they feel like suddenly a surge of power and confidence, or some of them might feel a great relief, like a load off their shoulders. And some people might not feel anything immediately, but then when they recall the incident again, they realize, hey, I don't care anymore. It doesn't matter to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's spot on. It's a very unique, it's sort of like grief, right? We think we understand there's these stages of grief and people go through this and this. Same thing with the release of bodily emotions. Like every experience is unique, and it may create a shift quickly for one person and very slowly for another. Yeah, I think
Yes, I
that's
think there is an element of with therapy and even with reading and applying a self-help book, there's still it's not uniform. It's like there was a one size fits all. There has to be an authentic element in it for the client. That seeing what works for them, what doesn't, and maybe even create little variations for themselves when they're doing the exercise if they just sense that they need to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's the emotional component. What happens to the memory itself? How does memory evolve over time in your experience?
Well, I think it evolves where, I mean, you have to be a certain age. I mean, Piaget, the child therapist, had all how things develop at certain ages, and but his ideas were actually generous. I mean, he said around age 3 you begin to form memories, except that a lot of kids, and I know first thing I remember was when I was a year and a half old, singing Moon River with my mom to Andy
Oh,
Williams on television. And
oh,
then I remember waking up Christmas morning when I was 2. And so I think there's a lot of it has to do with, you but because he didn't want the parents of the slower kids to be offended, Piaget,
mhm.
so he gave underestimates. So, but I think memories form, and of course, one thing with memories that not a lot of people don't understand is as you develop more memories, you're changing your paradigm, your view of the world, and so the details of a memory from the past might be skewed in some way,
Yeah,
as you
yeah,
there
I've
might have
even
been
heard about it as if like you're almost every time you're bringing a memory into your current sort of view of the world, as you said, that you're actually rewriting it to a certain degree. And therefore, the original memory sort of fades into the background. Is that an accurate depiction? Or do you have something
yes, it'll
of that?
fade into the background. Well, a lot of us have what myself and people who have this condition,
Hmm.
hyperthymesia, many people have a filter where they'll conveniently forget a lot of the bad memories. But in fact, one of the less complimentary things that one article writer said about us, they said we're poor forgetters. So,
I like
you
that.
know,
Yeah, that's interesting.
yeah,
So you wrote a book called Somatic Therapy for Beginners.
right.
Brilliant. Can you tell us a little bit about, I know that somatic work often requires a sort of centering, calming, being aware of the body. And I've had clients myself and even my own experience at times where I'm just like looking through my body and I'm not really finding anything notable. What would you say are the kinds of signals that you tend to look for in yourself and in others when doing a body scan, as an example?
I think I do this exercise, the body scan meditation with clients, and you focus on each part of your body. Like I might start out with the feet and toes, then go up to the bottom of the legs, knees, calf, and go all through until you're at the top of the head. And sometimes by doing that, people would notice which part is, maybe has a little bit of pain or a little bit tired more than the other.
Mhm.
And I'll give you one typical example of that. A lot of people, when they get to the hands, they find that the writing hand often feels more tired or tense than their than their other hand
Mm.
because of a lot of use and having it close down a little bit when they have a pen in their hand. And but I think that has lessened since more people use computers now and using both hands to type.
Yeah.
So, and it could be you might discover one leg or foot has more pain than the other, which might tell you that your balance is a little off when you walk. You're
Hmm.
favoring one side versus the other. So it can be really helpful to scan your body. And I think it's part of people's personal responsibility to know how their body works.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. I think of it like, I mean, I often will think of it like a car or like something mechanical that you own. Like you try to understand like how not to break it, how to take care of it, how it
Yeah,
works so that you're not going to the mechanic as an example and feeling completely uneducated, right?
that's
And
right.
yeah. All right. So the other book I want to ask you about is Happy Every Day. I love the premise that happiness is not just on the weekends and on vacations. And we, as you alluded to earlier, we live in a world where there's a lot of anxiety provoking content, events happening around us. So during these types of times, what is one practical thing that anybody could do to cultivate happiness?
I think one thing they could do is look for some satisfactions and some joys in their everyday life. For instance, like if somebody feels, do they get any satisfaction from doing their job, any sense of accomplishment? Or, well, I mean, I have a thing where my full time job is the building is just a couple blocks away from the Delaware Bay. And
Hmm.
so during a break, you can go down there and watch the water and the wildlife and things. That's some everyday joys and take a walk, or maybe if you're a parent, appreciate some appreciate things that your kids do and little things that you might have taken for granted otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely. Would you say that happiness is a skill or a state or a philosophical perspective? Like, how would you kind of frame happiness in general?
Well, I think you might call it philosophical, but I think just like healing yourself that we talked about, it has to be more than just intellect. For instance, if your gratitude has a lot to do with happiness, but I think rather than just make a list of things without any emotion, you could think about why I'm grateful for this and maybe imagine yourself enjoying it. That'll really
Mm.
get the gratitude up and the happiness, and so doing things you enjoy, like taking some time out from your day. And I know for some super busy people, that might demand that they schedule it in, like
Hmm.
everything else in their life is scheduled. Well, they might need to schedule time for themselves.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think a lot of people think, oh, it's just, when I have extra time, I will meditate or I will have a gratitude list or journal or all of those really important things for mental health. But that's not treating it like they treat the rest of their lives, right? The rest of their lives is scheduled, there's intention there, right? Words of wisdom for sure. Speaking of wisdom, you also wrote another book. I can't believe 20 books. That's like very impressive. Stoicism for Resilience. So, speaking of the wise, Marcus Aurelius is one of my favorite writers. And in terms of my own journey in mental health, like Stoicism was a critical factor for me, for sure. So, how would you say that ancient Stoic wisdom intersects with mental health healing?
Well, I would say that, I mean, some people who don't really know about Stoicism but just heard the term might think it means you walk around like a robot without any feelings. But it's a lot more than that. Basically, what it's about is control, being in control of your emotions rather than letting them control you. Like you can, if you get upset, I mean, well, you should acknowledge your feelings and emotions, but you experience them in a controlled way so that, like, you don't throw something and break it or scream and yell and disturb the house and the neighbors. You can just keeping yourself under control. And it does mean you still feel the unwanted as well as the more desirable feelings.
Yeah, absolutely. I often will use the metaphor of a huge aviation buff, as you can see behind me, but I often will compare it to like sitting in the cockpit of an aircraft, right? And you have all of these indicators, right? Nowadays it's a computer and it's like, the indicators are on a singular screen, but it, used to be like lots of lights. And those lights will go off sometimes, and sometimes it's just the light going off and it's nothing broken. The engine is not dead and your tail didn't fall off or whatever the case may be,
Yeah.
right? And so you're absolutely right. Feelings are feelings, and you have a choice of what you do with those, right?
Yeah, so that's right. You have a choice, and well, one choice that people have when maybe when they're upset that they didn't do something well, they could channel that into determination to learn it better and master a skill that they have, and
Hmm.
you know, the skill that they have or to get better at something. But to do that, first they have to look inside and think about, am I interested enough in this that I want to get better? Or maybe I should just drop it and get into other things.
Right. Absolutely. Do I bring curiosity to this or not? So, Frank, we're trying out this new kind of part of the podcast where you do kind of a fill in the blank in a rapid
Okay.
succession. So I'm going to give you four, and I'll try to keep them to the topics that we've been talking about, particularly around memory. So the first one is: a healed memory feels like blank.
Feels like relief.
Yes, perfect. The body tells the truth when.
When something is either right or wrong with you. I mean, it
Mm,
can give you a bad feeling if something's hurting, you need to attend to it. But also when you're feeling good all over, it's it's a sign that you're doing well, taking care of your body and yourself.
yeah. Happiness is not blank.
Control and power.
Oof. Yes, absolutely. And then the last one is: the past loses its power when blank.
When you heal the emotions and move on to a happier and brighter future.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Lots of good wisdom there. So, one last question before we close today. If you could give one sentence of hope to someone who feels trapped in their past, you just spoke about this. What would that sentence be?
Present and future can be better if you make it better.
Which requires some effort, right?
It does require effort, but it's worth.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Frank, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Yes, it's been a pleasure.
I know it's been a short 20 some odd minutes, but a lot of good, strong content. And for
Good.
those out there listening, if today's conversation helped you rethink your relationship with memory, hit like, leave a comment, and subscribe for more conversations that bridge psychology and lived experience. And if you're looking for therapy support tailored for your needs, feel free to visit metatherapy.guide for a personalized therapy match. And remember, this podcast is educational. It's not therapy, but it might help you prepare for it. Thanks for being on Metatherapy, Frank. And to all our listeners, until next week. Bye.
Have a good day.